I know you and I have talked about this, and I know that it's not going to be easy. As you mentioned a moment ago, it's not something that you're jumping up and down with joy about doing, but I know you have a heart to help others, and there are many out there, many that we know right now that are facing very difficult times. So thanks for sharing your story with us. Take us back to April the 22nd last year. What happened on that day?
Well, it'll be very hard, and I preface this by just saying there'll be tears in this interview.
Sure.
I'm sure, but it's hard to go back and even think about it because it's painful. But as you know, we had purchased a carpet cleaning business, and it was Zach's desire to be able to someday be running that on his own. And so he had been doing a job the previous evening at an industrial location, new building, and they wanted some cleaning done. And I had left him that evening at about 7:30, and he was cleaning it up, and I'd made a telephone call to check on him and was going to come and help him roll the hoses, and put it all up and get it done. And unfortunately, it was a very, very windy, stormy evening. And in the back of the building, there's a garage, and we had gone ahead because of the fierce wind and dust and all that. You just couldn't accomplish the cleaning part with that going on. And so we'd moved the van inside the garage and had the garage door open about halfway. And like I said, I had left Zach and had checked on him and was going to come roll the hoses with him. And he said, "No, Dad," he said, "I'm done. There's no sense in coming." And so the next morning, of course, just couldn't find him and went looking for him. And all of a sudden, this grip on my heart said, "I've got to go check the building." And when I pulled up to the back of the building, the garage door was down. Still didn't really hit me for sure. I'm still this, the parents, we have these fears, but almost always they don't come true. They're just fears. Right. We worry. And so I went, and as I approached the garage, there was a side door. I heard the van. I heard the clicking of the pump, still trying to, suction up. And that's when I knew. And I, of course, ran around the van and found him laying on the floor. And he was gone. And I remember, it's interesting, those of you out there that may think this is crazy, but the first thought that came to my mind was, the Lord is going to raise him up. Zach and I had talked about that miracle before because we're definitely a family that believes in the supernatural. We definitely believe in miraculous healings. But one of the things that we had talked about that is miraculous that you don't see hardly ever or rarely is a resurrection. And for some reason, I believe it was the Holy Spirit. That was the first thing that came to my mind. It wasn't outrage. It wasn't just freaking out. It wasn't any of that. There was a supernatural peace that fell on me right there. I didn't react in any way that I would have, if you'd have asked me how I would have reacted. And I just began to pray for God to raise him up and thank the Lord. And I remember walking around the room even and saying, "Lord, I thank you that you're going to raise him up." And because you're wanting to do miracles in Perryton, Texas, just like you're doing around the world. And of course, while I was doing this, I had instinctively tried to do CPR because that was just an instinct. Mm-hmm. But he was gone. And he had been gone for quite a while. He had spent, obviously he had been there the whole evening. He had come back as best as I could, and investigators could come by. He had, that carbon monoxide, that garage door had fell at some point. The wind had blown it shut. It was a free garage door. It wasn't, on any kind of chain or anything like that. Mm-hmm. And unbeknownst to Zach, in carpet cleaning, you go to the farthest end and you work your way back. And he had come back into that garage, and it had become so filled with carbon monoxide that it overtook him as he came back in, and he fell. So,
Was the carbon monoxide just from the exhaust on the
Yes.
van alone?
Yes.
It wasn't something that's involved in the cleaning process.
No. It was just carbon monoxide. You're running a motor, and that motor's producing, carbon monoxide.
Yeah.
It's got to have a place to escape,
Yeah.
and it didn't have anywhere to go.
We hear about the warnings of carbon monoxide, and I don't know much about it. I would assume, well, it makes you sleepy, but it takes some time. I'm sure
Yes.
you've learned a lot more about that since. So the
Well-
feeling is if it gets to a certain consistency and
Yes.
saturation, it can be very quick.
It is. It's instantaneous. If you've got a room and it's completely saturated with carbon monoxide, it's seconds before you pass out, and then minutes before your body shuts
So
down.
the idea that, I'm getting dizzy, what's going on? Oh, that door's closed.
Yeah.
That never didn't
Yeah.
have the chance to do that. Quite,
and
quite
the
like
garage was fairly small. It wasn't a big garage. I'm sure when you think about like a mechanic's garage or something where you've got automobiles in, whether it's at Hergert Ford or Irwin, whatever, that's this huge
Right.
space,
Right.
And so this was pretty confined. But anyway, as I began to pray and ask the Lord to bring him back, there was a point that came fairly soon into my prayers where I felt like I heard the Lord. Well, I did. In my mind's eye anyway, I saw the Lord in Zach, and the Lord said, he's with me, and he doesn't want to come back. And that was the end of that prayer and that pleading to God to bring him back. And my focus immediately became on getting a hold of my wife, getting a hold of my daughter, and of course the police had shown up by then, the ambulance, because I had made that call immediately, and having to answer questions for them about the events that had taken place. And
Had the van died?
oh yeah, it had run out of gas.
Okay.
It had run out of gas.
That was my next question. Why didn't the carbon monoxide get you then when you walked in? But it had been off.
And see, that's another thing when you think about, and you can imagine as a parent, I should have gone. Why didn't I go? I know my wife to this day still beats herself up because, she was like, well, why didn't I go? Why didn't I call him? Why didn't I check? All those questions. And the simple fact is anyone that had entered that building would have been overcome and would have suffered the same fate. So it's just hard to even go through that, to even imagine.
No, we can't.
And
we
you
can't.
can't.
Imagine.
You really
We
can't.
imagine.
So
What have you learned about losing a child through this process that from the outside in of years gone by, you could only imagine and dread and fear, and as you try to, as a minister, love others that have gone through that tragedy? We say it, but it's true, isn't it? If you're a parent, it is your worst nightmare, and it's something that there's just absolutely no possible way to comprehend unless it becomes personal.
that's very true. You'll remember Joel Atkins, who was in Zach's class.
Sure.
And Joel passed away at a very young age, still in high school. And I remember like it was yesterday going in to tell Zach that he had passed away and how heartbreaking that was to even think or imagine what that must, what the Atkins family must have been going through. And it was very difficult. And so what I've learned is you don't have a clue. You think you do. As a minister, I've prayed with and buried many people, several people, I won't say many, but done services, funeral services, and you quote the scriptures and you tell them that that Jesus is the peace that surpasses all understanding, because you don't understand. And you believe it and you minister it, but until it actually happens to you, you just can't even have a clue about what it's doing, you know, what you're going through. There's shock, there's pain, there's disbelief. And so, I thought about a lot of those things. I thought about the Atkins family after I lost Zach, and I remembered, man, I had no idea what they were going through. Caitlin Cook was another one, young one that we lost. And I remember ministering to the Cook family and thinking, after Zach had passed, I have no idea. And even since then, I've had people call and say, could you come? Could you come and minister to this family? They've lost a child. And I remember thinking, Lord, I can't do this. In fact, 3 weeks after Zach died, here in this community, we lost a young Hispanic boy, and I didn't know him. I didn't know the family. But the Hispanic community began to call and Facebook and communicate, could you come? And I remember saying, Lord, do you really expect me to come and do this after I just lost my son? And I remember him, and when I say I hear him, I'm not saying I hear an audible voice, but I get an impression, I feel like I hear the Lord's, and I heard him say, no, you don't have to. And I kind of put it down. And the next day or two came by, and here came more calls. And I said, Lord, you said I didn't have to do this. And he's like, you don't. But you could relieve someone's pain. And when I heard that, I went. And I remember asking him, but what am I going to say to him? Just because I've lost a son doesn't mean I have words. Because to me, nobody's words really were helping me.
Yeah.
Even people who had lost.
Right.
And he said, I'll tell you what to say. And when I got there and met him, the words that came out of my mouth were, I have no idea how you feel. And he looked at me perplexed, because they had told him that I had just lost Zach. And he said, well, I thought they told me you'd lost your son. And I said, I have, but I have no idea how you feel, because you don't. Because everybody's different.
Right.
Everybody's relationship with their children, their relationship to God, all of those things are factors. And I lost my mom just a couple of years ago. And so loss was not new to me, but it was different. You see what I mean? Everyone is different. My mom, of course, was older, in bad health. And so in some ways it was a relief in some ways.
Right.
It was still painful, but there's a hope, Chris, that I have in Jesus, in an afterlife, in heaven. And these are the things, the elements that keep us going, because it's not over. It's not over. I will see Zach again. Right. We will be reunited. We will be reunited for eternity. And there'll be a while here where we're separated. But even in his death, I feel his life every day.
What do you say, Pastor, to the person listening right now who does not have that faith? And they hear you say that, and they sympathize, and they say, well, of course you do. Well, of course you believe that. But that's a crutch. That's a crutch. That's something that you have found in your belief system that gives you a measure of peace and more to you, power to you. But I don't believe that happens. Right. I don't. What do you say to that person?
Well, I would say this, even in many people who are believers in the very same thing, many of those believers turn away from the Lord when they lose someone. We have a tendency to want to blame God, because we all know that God could have intervened but chose not to. Well, why didn't you? And so those are questions that you have to deal with. For me personally, when I lost Zach, I was stripped to the core, and people are. And that's when you find out what you really believe. You've been preaching it, you've been saying it, but when it happens to you, and I had nowhere to turn to but my belief system, and it was even stronger. It wasn't just a crutch or a comfort, it was a realization. It was like when you have theory And then all of a sudden you have experience. And until you experience it, it's theory.
Mm-hmm.
And it has become an experience for me. It has become a realization to me that if there is no plan B for my life. I had nowhere to go. Mabel to this day, my wife, and I hope that she'll forgive me for speaking for her, but I remember watching Mabel over this past year, angry with God, upset with him. But there was multiple times over this past year that she would turn to me and say, I don't even want to believe in him. But I just can't not believe in him. You're stripped. It's the refiner's fire. And you really, when something like this happens, you really find out what you really do believe. And God has walked us through it. All three of us, Kristen, Mabel, and I, at different stages, a different pace of healing. I felt like the Lord kept me strong in the beginning because I needed to be strong for Mabel and Kristen and even for the community. I mean, Chris, one of the things I learned was I wasn't the only one that loved Zach. There were a lot of people, a lot of young people. And as they came to visit and share their comfort, I could see the pain, on their faces. And the Lord gave me the ability in those moments to love on them and comfort them, just like I would if it would have been a friend's loss. Yeah. And then a lot of my grief came later. After things died down.
Right.
So.
Right. And I know that, which was my case, there were many of us that did not know Zach very well personally, but just from a bit of a distance, we knew there's something special about that young man. This is a special young man, and I know many felt that way. And I guess, really, we didn't plan it this way, but here we are in Easter week, and coming up on Good Friday and Easter Sunday. And I won't take a lot of time to get into all that, but I know you believe to the core when you talk about, it's more than just a crutch to me, it's real. You believe, as many of us believe who are of the Christian faith, that empty tomb, and not just religiously, but historically, the facts are the tomb is empty. Historically and religiously through the Christian faith. And that's the proof, that's the bottom line proof at the end of the day, I guess, that because he lives, so will Zach, so does Zach, and you will see him again. I can't imagine not having that hope, that understanding and facing what you guys have gone through. Let me ask you this. As a minister who, as you said initially, you and your family did and continue to believe that God is a miracle-working God. And that would put you, for some people find that very uncomfortable.
Yes.
Some people dismiss it completely. Well, he could, but he doesn't. He did, but he don't. Whatever one's personal belief system is. But you believe that God does miracles, that God heals, not just over time through cancer treatments, but that God can heal. Boom, right now. Had it a minute ago, gone.
Right.
And I hear you talk about stories about it happening in other places. As a minister who believes those things and preaches those things, and I've seen you preach them and testify of that faith many times, how have you reconciled that part of your belief system when you thanked God, you prayed God, he's going to raise this boy from the dead, watch this, and it never happened?
Well, it's like I go back to what I heard the Lord say to me. He said, he's with me, and he doesn't want to come back. To me, those are words of a choice, that Zach had a choice. It's interesting. I took Zach down on the altar when he was a baby, and I dedicated him. And the Lord brought this back to my mind when I was saying, why, Lord? Because when I dedicated him, I said, he's yours, Lord. He's yours to do with as you will. It's interesting to say that, and then 24 years later to say, no, Lord, he's not yours. No, you can't do with him what you want. He's mine. Do you see that?
Yeah.
We say a lot of
Oh, yeah.
things
Oh, yeah.
religiously that maybe it's our culture or tradition or we've been brought up in.
Yeah.
And that's why doctrine and culture and many things that are man-made, they come crashing down through circumstances and tragedies and heartache and pain. That's why I'm telling you, you're stripped to the core when something like this happens. And the only thing that stands is that foundation that has been built. And if it's on shifting sand, you're in trouble. But I reconcile that there is resurrection. Everybody across this town is going to hear something about Jesus saying, I am the resurrection and the life. And he who believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And if he who believes and lives in me will never die. You see, my faith says Zach never died. He passed from glory to glory. He went from this earth to heaven. I believe Jesus was with him the whole way. Chris, I pray, and I know parents out there that pray for their kids every day, that they flourish, that they have life to the fullest. Every parent wants their kid to do better than they did. Every parent wants the best for their kids. And I pray, Lord, I want the best for Zach. Heaven is the best. Now, does that mean I wanted him to go now? Absolutely not. Does that mean if I could have him back, would I have him back? Absolutely. But I can't on the one hand say that heaven is the best and I want the best for my son, but no, I don't want him to go to heaven. You see how you cannot reconcile that?
Sure.
Now, there's always a mystery about God. If we had it all figured out, we wouldn't seek him anymore. We wouldn't need to because we already have it. So there's always a mystery. There's always more to learn, always more to experience with the Lord. This will be very hard for people to take, but I have more of an understanding of what Jesus went through, what the Father went through when he sent his son, and he saw him, and he offered him up as a sacrifice just because of this death. Now, if you ask me, okay, Gary, I'm going to give you more insight into God, but we're going to have to take your son, I would have said no, absolutely not, because that's a flesh in me that says, I want him more than that.
Right.
But it happened. And so now we have a choice. We always have a choice, Chris. We can look at his death and mourn him, which we have. Or we can look at his life and celebrate him. And that's why we're having a celebration. When I thought about, okay, how are we going to deal with Mother's Day? How are we going to deal with his birthday? How are we going to deal with these things? We had a choice on every event. We can mourn and be in just absolute, horrific hurting, or we can go after life. And it's a fight. If I had a message today to the people out there, by grace, we've been saved through faith. It's not of ourselves. There's nothing we can do. But to have abundant life in the midst of the storms and the tragedies, we have to fight for it. And Mabel and Kristen and I are fighting for life, an abundant life. Jesus didn't say, I came to give you life and life more abundantly if you never lose a son, or if you don't lose your business, or if tragedy never strikes. He said, I came to give you abundant life in the midst of all of those horrible things that are going on.
You mentioned the Adkins family and how Robin, for those that don't know, former superintendent of schools here in Puritan, you worked with him in those years through Puritan ISD, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
That is correct.
And we're friends, of course. And you talk about the loss of their son, Joel. I interviewed Robin several years ago, probably 5 or 6 years ago now, on one of the anniversaries of Joel's death. And for those that don't know, by the way, they have a young son who was, 14 or 15 at the time?
Mm-hmm.
And he's out mowing the lawn one day and goes in to take a shower and collapses in the shower and dies. It was a similar kind of, what?
Yeah, how did that happen?
How does that happen? Tragedy in their lives. And Robin as well, as of course you know, is a man of faith.
Yes.
And I remember asking him, I said, it was in the context of how this is impacted your faith? And he was just being transparent. He was just being honest. And I never will forget, one of the things that he told me was that, of course, his faith has been challenged, and it continues to be challenged. And he has questions that are yet unanswered, and then he gets mad, still yet, from time to time. But I remember one of the things that he said was that there are times when he'll hear others thanking God for something that happened. I was coming up to that intersection, and the light turned green, and here I go through the intersection, and lo and behold, this goober runs this red light, and we barely swerved and missed each other.
Right.
Thank God. I thank God that he saved me in that deal, or fill in the blank.
Right.
This almost happened, but God, thanks to God, he orchestrated it, and it didn't. And he said when he hears some of those things, it really doesn't set well sometimes, because as a father who lost a son, he's thinking, oh, really? So God reached down and orchestrated the intersection there so that you avoided the tragedy. But if my son would have just fallen a little bit differently, he may not have died in that shower. Are you kidding me? So God does this and God did this. Why you and why not me?
Right.
What do you do with those questions?
Well, I think they all are individual. I couldn't speak for Robin or Joel, in that passing, and I wouldn't want to, but I can speak for me and for our loss of Zach. Zach was a young man who had a heart for people, and he loved people, and he loved the Lord. And even in saying that, I'm not even trying to say that Zach didn't have issues, didn't have problems, didn't make mistakes, because he did. But when it was all said and done, he loved people. His heart went out. Well, in saying that, you say, well, Lord, why didn't you intervene? You could have, but you chose not to. I guess I go back to the best thing for my son. You and I, Chris, we stumble around and have problems and issues and, just deal with things every day, things that get us down, things that drag, heartache and pain, just like this death. Zach will never experience that. He will never have to go through that again. I mean, any negative, it's gone. There is no more negative. And so for me, God could have intervened, but he didn't. It sounded to me like, from what I heard from the Lord, and I know people have a hard time believing that I heard from him, whether it was the Lord or whether it was a thought that came to my mind, I experienced Jesus saying he's with me and he doesn't want to come back. Does that make sense?
Sure.
And so I want him back. Mabel wants him back. Kristen wants him back. Many of us want him back. But Zach, if he did have a choice, decided to stay. And why would he not? To be with the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And so that's how I say the Lord could have intervened. I believe the Lord did intervene. Gave Zach a choice, and Zach said no. You see, we do stupid things in life. Should have never pulled that van in. Should have never have, I've thought of a million different things that I could have done differently. Kept the van outside, put the van underneath the garage door. There's no way it could have fallen. It would have fallen on top of the van. Things like that. We did something, or maybe I should say I did something stupid by pulling that van in there, because I was there, and I was like, yeah, just pull it in here. We made a mistake. The Lord could have intervened. He did intervene. But he gave Zach a choice, and Zach said, I'm going to stay. I want to stay. Now, that's very heartbreaking for us. Until we see it all the way through and see that it's a short time that we're going to be separated. He is in heaven. I said it at the funeral. This was a game changer for this community, I believe. Were you at the funeral? Mm-hmm. So many people were there. So many people's lives were touched. I had thousands of emails and, Facebooks and all that stuff of people whose lives were touched. It was an event that was heartbreaking, but yet may change the entire community. Not because Zach was more important than Joel or anybody else that's lost, but because we're going to take this thing and we're going to go after this community for the Lord, because we want everyone to have the same peace that we have, the same faith, and enjoy the same love, experience God's love and his goodness. God was good before Zach died, and he's good after Zach died. He's good. And I'm telling you, I would not be able to have this interview with you today if it wasn't for the Lord. There's a supernatural strength. There's a supernatural peace that if we would just let God in, no matter what the circumstances, we cannot be moved, because the power of God is on our lives. And I've been able to share the gospel and share God's love with people. Yeah, and people are more open. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Because they know what we've been through.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so for those that you ask that question that maybe believe it's a crutch or it's a farce or it's just something to make you feel better, yeah, I feel better. I feel a lot better because of the power of God and his love for us. So.
What do you say in closing, Gary, to the person listening right now who is facing their own tragedy?
Mm-hmm.
You may be talking to, God forbid, some that don't even know that tragedy's at the door, and it will come, and they face similar heartache. What do you say to them?
Well, I say that tragedy and heartache fall to what we, quote, deem good people and bad people. You know, you hear many times people say, well, he was such a good person. You know, why would it happen to him? Almost to say that if it was a bad person, it was okay. And
Right.
I'm telling you, every person is valuable to God. Every person is valuable to their parents or their loved ones. There are no, you know, this was a good person and this one was less worthy, you know. And I would say that tragedy happens. That's one of the things that I've been made aware of that I wasn't aware of before, Chris. This happens all the time. And I was kind of just not aware of it. But, you know, now that it's happened to me, I just see lots of people that have lost children that I didn't even know they had. And so I would say, you know, the Lord is the answer. He is the solution. There's no way. I would hate to try to get through this life without him and without his intervening, you know, and his mercy and his grace and his love. So I don't know if that answers the question.
And what do you say to the person who says, I believe that, but I've gone through this tragedy and I have prayed and I have sought and I just still am overcome with grief?
I just say that that's what faith is staying with it. You stay with it. You believe that there is going to be intervention from the Lord. Sometimes it's not immediate, just like the healing. Sometimes it's not immediate. But there is breakthrough. The Lord is the God of the breakthrough, and he will break through for me. He has, and he will for you that are listening today. That's why we're doing the celebration, and we want to celebrate life. Every tragedy, bad circumstance is a two-sided coin, and you can look at the negative or you can look at the positive. And I do believe, and Mabel and I, with all of our hearts, want to use this tragedy for the good of this community, if at all possible. And that's why we're doing this concert, and that's why we want everybody to come out. It's free. Anything that is of expense, I'm paying for on my own. We want to honor Zach. We want to honor others that have gone, been lost too, like Joel and Willie Lopez. And I mean, I can't tell you everybody because there's too many, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. But this is a time for people to come together and celebrate their lives. This is a week to celebrate life, Jesus, the resurrection and the life. And anyone who comes to him has eternal life. And that's what we want.
Well, Pastor, there are so many of us who, of course, cannot relate to that level of grief, but we want you to know that you and Mabel and Kristen, your family, have been an inspiration to many of us, because I have to be honest. I think if I were a minister and it happened to me, you've said it before, I've heard you say it, there's nobody on the planet that would have questioned you had you said, well, that's it.
I'm done.
I'm not turning my back on God. I'm just saying I'm not going to be the preacher anymore, because I'm going to go do something else. And everybody would say, boy, I understand that.
Yeah.
But you've continued to hang in and minister to others in spite of your own journey of grief, and as have your wife and your daughter. And you have been and you continue to be an inspiration to many of us.
Can I say this real quickly?
Sure.
I want to thank everybody out there that's listening who's prayed for us. I'm telling you, that's another thing. God uses these tragedies to bring people together. And man, we have had such an outpouring of love from this community. And I thank you from the bottom. Mabel thanks you, and Kristen, for your prayers and for everything that you've done. God's doing things in this community, Chris. He is moving on people's lives and their hearts, and he's bringing people together. And Perryton is in the midst of what I call revival. And anything, we love the people. We love this community. We want to see people flourish. And anything that we can do. And it's not me. I get together with ministers every week, and other people. This is a community of believers, and we want to help in any way we can.
The 26th of April is the date for the Zach Mills Memorial Celebration. It's going to be on that Saturday night over at Community Worship Center. That is a Saturday. Yes, it is. And we'll start at 6 o'clock on that night. There are going to be performances by Uncle Reese. Is it Uncle Reese or Reese?
Uncle Reese.
You're going to have to help me with some of these. Uncle Reese, a band called 39 Thoughts, Jonathan Traylor, and One Way will all minister on that night, and it's going to be a celebration of Zach's life, and all are invited. It's going to be at Community Worship Center on the evening of the 26th. Pastor Mills, thanks for your time today.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks for sharing your journey with us. Bless you.
Amen.
Pastor Gary Mills. It is 10:08.